Alarms tore through the command deck before Admiral Claire Whitfield had even finished her coffee. Red light washed over every console on the bridge of the Valor Dawn, and for a moment nobody spoke. Then Lieutenant Grace Sutton's voice cut through the noise, tight and fast. "Admiral, we have a distress signal from Colony Outpost 7. It cut off 11 seconds ago." Claire set the coffee down without looking at it. 11 seconds was not a delay. 11 seconds was an ending. "Get me a channel to Fleet Command," she said. "Now." The bridge of the Valor Dawn was the newest and largest command deck in the Terran Federation Navy, but in that moment it felt small, almost fragile, surrounded by the vast dark of open space. Claire had commanded starships for 18 years. She had seen skirmishes, blockades, and tense standoffs at the edges of Federation territory. She had never, in all that time, heard silence fall across a bridge the way it did now. Captain Daniel Foss stepped up beside her, his jaw set. He was younger than Claire by a decade, sharp-eyed, and usually the first to crack a joke to ease the tension of the crew. He was not joking now. "Confirmed kill signature on the outpost's shield grid," he said quietly, reading from his datapad. "Whatever hit them went through the defense net like it wasn't there. Survivors? Scanners show nothing. No life signs. No wreckage large enough to hold escape pods." Claire felt something cold settle behind her ribs. Outpost 7 had housed 400 people. Engineers, teachers, families who had chosen to build a life on the edge of known space because the Federation had promised them it would be safe. Who did this? She asked, though some part of her already suspected the answer. Grace answered from her station, her voice barely above a whisper. "The scan pattern matches known energy signatures from the Vorlax Collective, Admiral. It's them." The name rippled through the bridge like a shockwave. The Vorlax Collective was not a rumor or a distant threat discussed in briefing rooms. They were a real and growing danger, an alien alliance that had been probing the outer rim of Federation space for the past 2 years. There had been encounters before, brief, tense, and unresolved, but nothing like this. Nothing that erased an entire outpost in the space of a single message. Claire straightened her uniform and turned to face her crew. She had learned long ago that fear spread fastest when a commander let it show, so she buried hers deep and spoke with the steady calm that had earned her the respect of every soldier under her command. "Send the distress signal and the scan data to Fleet Command immediately, along with our coordinates," she said. "I want a full diagnostic on our shields and weapons within the hour. If the Vorlax are moving against outpost colonies, we need to know exactly what we are dealing with, and we need to be ready before they decide to move again." The order kicked the bridge back into motion, but the questions did not fade so easily. As officers began relaying commands to their stations, Daniel leaned toward Claire, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You think this is the beginning of something bigger?" Claire watched the tactical display update in front of her, a small red marker blinking where Outpost 7 used to be. "I think," she said slowly, "that we are about to find out." 3 hours later, Claire stood inside a secure briefing room aboard the Valor Dawn, watching a holographic star map rotate above the central table. Fleet Command had responded faster than she expected, and the orders that came back were unlike anything she had received before. A hologram of Fleet Admiral Henry Pratt flickered to life above the table, his image slightly grainy from the distance the signal had to travel. Henry was an older man, with silver hair, and the kind of tired eyes that came from decades of difficult decisions. He did not waste time on pleasantries. "Admiral Whitfield," he said, "what happened at Outpost 7 is not an isolated incident. We have lost contact with 2 additional listening posts along the border in the last 6 hours. Based on everything we know, this appears to be the opening move of a coordinated offensive by the Vorlax Collective." Claire felt her stomach tighten. "An offensive against the entire border, sir?" "That is our assessment," Henry confirmed, "which is why Fleet Command has authorized the activation of Task Force Aurora, effective immediately. You have been selected to lead it." Claire blinked, caught off guard despite years of training that had taught her to expect the unexpected. Task Force Aurora was a name she had only heard mentioned in classified briefings, a fleet formation built around the newest generation of Terran warships, powered by experimental quantum drive engines and outfitted with weapons systems still being fine-tuned in testing facilities. It had never been deployed. Until now, it had existed only on paper and in simulation. "Sir," Task Force Aurora hasn't completed final trials, she said carefully. Half the ships assigned to it have never flown in real combat conditions. I am aware of that, Admiral, Henry replied, his tone firm but not unkind. I am also aware that if the Vorlax continue at their current pace, we will lose every outpost along the border within a matter of days. We do not have the luxury of waiting for perfect conditions. You are the most experienced fleet commander we have. If anyone can bring this task force together in time, it is you. Claire studied the star map floating above the table, watching as new markers blinked into existence, each one representing another outpost that had gone dark in the hours since Outpost 7. The pattern was becoming clear. The Vorlax were sweeping across the border in a wide arc, moving with a speed and precision that suggested careful planning rather than random aggression. Where do you want the fleet assembled? She asked. Staging Point Delta, Henry answered. You will rendezvous with the rest of Task Force Aurora within 20 hours. From there, our intelligence suggests the Vorlax fleet is gathering in the Halden Expanse, likely preparing for their next strike. Your mission is to intercept them before they reach another populated system. And if we don't reach them in time? Henry's expression darkened. Then we will be having a very different conversation, Admiral. I trust you understand the stakes. The hologram flickered out, leaving Claire alone in the briefing room with the slowly rotating star map. She studied the markers a moment longer, memorizing the shape of the growing crisis, before she turned and made her way back toward the bridge. Word of the mission spread through the Valor Dawn within the hour, and Claire could feel the shift in the atmosphere of her ship. Soldiers moved with quicker steps. Technicians worked through checklists with an intensity that had not been there the day before. Fear was present, she knew, but so was something else, a quiet determination that ran through the crew like a current. She found Daniel in the weapons bay, standing beside one of the ship's massive graviton lance turrets, deep in conversation with a young weapons engineer named Sophie Lang. Sophie was barely 25, with quick hands and an even quicker mind, one of the few technicians who had actually worked on the prototype weapon systems during their testing phase. Will they hold up? Claire asked, stepping into the bay. Sophie turned, startled for a moment, before straightening into a more formal posture. The graviton lances, Admiral? They're solid. We've run them through every simulation Fleet Command could throw at them. The real question is how the crews handle live combat conditions. Simulations only take you so far. That's usually the case, Claire said. Are you confident in your team? Sophie hesitated only briefly before nodding. Yes, Admiral, we're ready. Daniel watched the exchange with a faint, tired smile. You always ask the same question before a big mission, he said once Sophie had returned to her work. Are you confident in your team? Because the answer matters, Claire replied. A ship is only as strong as the people running it. They walked together toward the observation deck, a wide window that looked out over the stars, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that settled over people who had faced difficult moments together before, and who understood there was little use in filling every gap with words. You knew people at Outpost 7, didn't you? Daniel said eventually. Claire nodded slowly. A teacher there. Ruth Ashford. She used to send letters about the students, about how excited they were to learn about the stars they were living among. She paused, her eyes fixed on the distant points of light outside the window. It feels different when it's not just coordinates on a map. It always is, Daniel said. That's what keeps us honest. Claire allowed herself a brief moment of stillness, gathering the resolve she would need for what lay ahead, before straightening her shoulders and turning back toward the corridor. Get some rest if you can, she told Daniel. Once we reach Staging Point Delta, there won't be much time for it. 20 hours later, the Valor Dawn dropped out of quantum transit at the edge of Staging Point Delta, and Claire watched from the bridge as the rest of Task Force Aurora came into view. Ship after ship emerged from the dark, sleek Federation cruisers, with hulls that gleamed faintly under the light of a distant star, support vessels loaded with supplies and repair crews, and at the center of it all, 3 massive capital ships built specifically for this mission, their new quantum drive engines glowing with a soft blue light along their spines. It was, without question, the largest and most advanced fleet the Terran Federation had ever assembled. All ships reporting in, Admiral, Grace announced from her station, a note of quiet awe in her voice despite the tension of the moment. Task Force Aurora is fully assembled. Claire stood at the center of the bridge, looking out at the gathered fleet through the forward viewport. Thousands of soldiers, pilots, and engineers were spread across those ships, each one now depending on decisions she would make in the hours to come. It was a weight she had carried before, in smaller measures, but never quite like this. She thought of Outpost 7, of Ruth Ashford and her students, of the silence that had fallen over the bridge when the distress signal cut off. She thought of the markers still blinking across the star map at Fleet Command, each one another outpost gone dark. "Set a course for the Halden Expanse," she said, her voice steady and clear enough for the entire bridge to hear. "It's time we found out exactly what we're facing." As the fleet began to move, engines igniting in unison across dozens of ships, Claire allowed herself one final thought before focusing entirely on the mission ahead. Whatever waited for them in the Halden Expanse, Task Force Aurora would not arrive unprepared, and it would not arrive without purpose. The Vorlax Collective had struck first. Now it was time for the Terran Federation to answer. The Halden Expanse looked peaceful from a distance, a wide stretch of open space scattered with slow-drifting asteroids and the faint glow of a dying star. Peaceful, Claire knew, was exactly the kind of word that got people killed out here. She stood at the center of the bridge, watching the long-range sensors sweep the region ahead of Task Force Aurora, and waited for the silence to break. It broke faster than she expected. "Admiral, we have a massive contact forming at the edge of sensor range," Grace called out, her hands moving quickly across her console. "Multiple signatures. I'm counting. I'm still counting, Admiral. This is larger than anything in our threat projections." Claire crossed the bridge in 3 quick steps to stand beside her. On the main display, dozens of small blips resolved into a formation that stretched across an enormous span of space, far larger than the Fleet Command's intelligence reports had predicted. "Give me a final count," Claire said. Grace's fingers paused over her console as the numbers settled. 143 vessels, Admiral, including what appears to be 6 capital-class ships, larger than anything we've recorded from the Vorlax before. A tense murmur rippled through the bridge crew. Daniel stepped up on Claire's other side, his eyes fixed on the display. "That's nearly triple the size of the fleet intelligence gave us," he said quietly. "They knew we'd be coming," Claire said, almost to herself. "Or they were already planning to move deeper into Federation space, and we just happened to arrive first." Either possibility was troubling. Task Force Aurora numbered 62 ships, a formidable force by any standard, built around some of the most advanced technology the Terran Federation had ever produced. But against a fleet more than twice its size, advanced technology alone might not be enough. "Orders, Admiral?" Daniel asked, his voice steady, despite the tension written across his face. Claire did not answer immediately. She studied the tactical display, watching the alien formation drift slowly at the edge of the expanse, seemingly unaware, for the moment, that they had been detected. There was a stillness to the enemy fleet that unsettled her more than an immediate attack would have. It felt like a predator resting before a hunt, confident that nothing in the sector posed a genuine threat. "What's their current heading?" she asked. Grace checked her readings. "They're holding position, Admiral. No indication they've spotted us yet. Our stealth systems seem to be masking our approach, at least for now." That was something, at least. A narrow window, and perhaps their only real advantage. Claire thought of every tactical lesson she had absorbed over 18 years of service, every lecture on the dangers of hesitation in the face of overwhelming numbers. Retreating now would mean abandoning any chance of stopping the Vorlax before they struck the next colony. It would also mean preserving Task Force Aurora to fight another day, with better information and a stronger position. Pressing forward meant gambling everything on a single, decisive strike, using the element of surprise before the enemy had the chance to organize a full response. "Bring up a tactical simulation," she said finally. "I want to see what happens if we commit to a first strike, using the graviton lance formation Sophie's team has been running drills on." The bridge crew worked quickly, and within minutes, a simulated battle played out across the holographic display. Projected lines of Terran ships moving into a coordinated attack pattern against the larger Vorlax formation. Claire watched closely, running the numbers in her mind alongside the simulation's own calculations. "If our new weapons perform at even 80% of their tested capability," Daniel said, studying the results, "we could inflict devastating losses in the opening minutes of the engagement. maybe enough to break their formation before they can properly respond. And if the weapons underperform? Claire asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then we're fighting a fleet twice our size, with conventional weapons, and no element of surprise left. It would not go well for us. Claire weighed the risk in silence for a long moment, the low hum of the bridge, the only sound around her. She thought again of the outposts that had already gone dark, of the patterns spreading across the border like a wound that refused to close. Waiting was not truly an option, not when every hour meant another colony within reach of the Vorlak's advance. We strike first, she said finally, her voice carrying across the bridge with quiet authority. Move the fleet into attack formation. I want every ship in position within the hour, and I want absolute silence on our communications until the order is given. If they don't know we're here, we use that for as long as we possibly can. The bridge erupted into focused motion, officers relaying orders down through the chain of command, pilots moving to their stations, weapons crews across the fleet beginning final preparations. Claire walked toward the forward viewport, watching as the ships of Task Force Aurora began sliding into a precise attack formation, dozens of vessels moving in perfect coordination, despite having trained together for only a matter of weeks. Daniel joined her a moment later, his expression thoughtful. You know, he said, there's a chance this doesn't work the way the simulations predict. Real combat rarely follows the numbers exactly. I know, Claire said. And you're still committing to it. I am. She turned to face him. Because the alternative is standing here doing nothing, while that fleet decides where to strike next. I'd rather take a calculated risk with the best odds we have, than wait for a certainty that guarantees we lose ground either way. Daniel studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. For what it's worth, Admiral, I think it's the right call. Let's hope the rest of the fleet agrees once the shooting starts, Claire replied, a faint, humorless smile touching her lips. Over the following hour, Task Force Aurora moved into position with quiet precision. Aboard the Valor Dawn, Sophie Lang worked alongside her weapons crew in the Graviton Lance control room, running final calibrations on the massive turrets that lined the ship's hull. The room buzzed with focused energy, technicians calling out readings while engineers made last adjustments to power distribution. Targeting systems are green across the board, Sophie reported into her headset, her voice tight with concentration. Graviton Lance capacitors at 98% charge. We're ready whenever the Admiral gives the word. Beside her, a young technician named Nathan Cole wiped a thin sheen of sweat from his forehead. He had transferred to weapons systems only 3 months earlier, and this would be his first real combat engagement. 98%, he repeated. Should we push for full charge before we commit? There isn't time, Sophie said. 2% won't make the difference between winning and losing this fight. Hesitation might. Nathan nodded, steadying himself, and returned his attention to his console. Elsewhere on the ship, Ethan Marsh sat in the cockpit of his fighter craft within the Valor Dawn's launch bay, running through his pre-flight checklist for what felt like the 10th time. Around him, dozens of other fighter pilots did the same, the launch bay filled with the low hum of engines warming up and the quiet chatter of final preparations. You ready for this? Asked the pilot in the fighter beside him, a woman named Charlotte Wren, her voice calm despite the enormity of what lay ahead. Ask me again in 20 minutes, Ethan replied, managing a thin smile. Charlotte laughed softly. Fair enough. Just remember, stay tight on the formation once we launch. The new tactical patterns only work if everyone holds their position. Copy that, Ethan said, closing his cockpit canopy and watching as the launch bay doors ahead of him slowly began to open, revealing the vast dark of space beyond. Back on the bridge, Claire stood at the center of the command deck, watching the final positioning reports come in from across the fleet. Every ship of Task Force Aurora had settled into its designated place within the attack formation, a massive, coiled arrangement designed to bring the full force of the fleet's new weapons to bear in the opening moments of the engagement. All ships report ready, Admiral, Grace announced. Claire looked out at the tactical display one final time, studying the alien formation still drifting, unaware, at the edge of the expanse. Somewhere within that formation were 6 capital ships and over 100 smaller vessels, each one representing a threat to every colony along the Federation border. She thought of Ruth Ashford, She thought of the silence that had followed the distress signal from Outpost 7. She thought of every marker that had appeared on the star map since, each one a reminder of what happened when hesitation cost too much time. "All ships," Claire said, her voice carrying clearly across the fleet's communication network, calm and steady, despite the weight of the moment. "This is Admiral Whitfield. We move on my mark." The bridge fell utterly silent, every officer holding their breath, waiting. Mark. 62 Terran warships surged forward as one, engines flaring to life across the formation, breaking cover and racing toward the unsuspecting Vorlax fleet at the edge of the Halden expanse. Claire watched the tactical display update in real time, dozens of markers converging rapidly on the enemy formation, and felt the familiar tightening in her chest that always came in the final moments before battle. There was no turning back now. Task Force Aurora had committed to its course, and within minutes, the true test of everything they had built would begin. The first graviton lance struck the lead Vorlax capital ship before its crew had time to raise a proper alarm. Claire watched from the bridge of the Valor Dawn as a beam of concentrated energy tore across the void and slammed into the alien vessel's shielding, and for a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the shield collapsed entirely, a shimmering wall of light folding in on itself, and the beam continued through the hull beneath it, as though the massive ship were made of little more than paper. "Direct hit," Sophie's voice came through the comm system, tight with disbelief, even as her hands moved efficiently across her console. "Their shields aren't holding, Admiral. Repeat. Their shields are not holding against the graviton lances." Across the bridge, officers exchanged startled glances. The simulated projections from hours earlier suddenly made real in front of them. The Vorlax capital ship, easily twice the size of anything in the Terran fleet, began venting atmosphere and debris from a massive wound along its side, its engines flickering erratically as internal systems failed one after another. "Fleet-wide, target the remaining capital ships," Claire ordered, her voice steady, despite the surge of adrenaline running through her. "Concentrate graviton lance fire before they have time to reroute power to compensate." Across the 62 ships of Task Force Aurora, weapons crews responded with practiced precision, years of simulation and weeks of hurried preparation, converging into a single, devastating opening assault. Beams of energy lanced out from a dozen different vessels, converging on the remaining Vorlax capital ships, before their crews had fully processed what was happening to their formation. Ethan Marsh banked his fighter sharply, weaving between debris that had once been part of a smaller Vorlax escort vessel, now scattered across the battlefield in the aftermath of the opening strike. Beside him, Charlotte Wren's fighter kept pace, the two of them holding their position within the tight formation their squadron had drilled for weeks. "They're not adapting," Charlotte's voice came through his comm, a note of cautious astonishment in her tone. "Look at their maneuvering patterns. It's like they don't know how to respond to what we're throwing at them." "Don't get comfortable," Ethan replied, pulling his fighter into a tight arc to avoid a stray burst of defensive fire from a smaller alien vessel. A fleet this size finding its footing is only a matter of time. Within the Valor Dawn's weapons control room, Sophie kept her focus locked on the readings streaming across her console, calling out targeting updates to the turret crews under her command. Beside her, Nathan Cole's earlier nervousness had given way to sharp, focused concentration, his hands moving quickly as he adjusted power distribution to keep the graviton lances firing at maximum efficiency. "Second capital ship's shields are failing," Nathan reported, watching the readings shift on his display. "I'm seeing power fluctuations across 3 more vessels in their formation. Whatever we're hitting them with, it's disrupting more than just the ship we're targeting." "Keep the pressure on," Sophie said. "Don't let them stabilize." Across the battlefield, the pattern held. Terran warships, moving with the coordinated precision of a fleet that had trained exhaustively for exactly this kind of engagement, tore through the Vorlax formation with a speed that even Claire, standing at the center of the Valor Dawn's bridge, found difficult to fully comprehend. Ship after ship in the alien fleet lost power, lost shielding, lost the ability to fight back, faster than their commanders seemed able to respond. "Third capital ship is disabled," Grace called out, her voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. "Fourth capital ship's engines are failing. Admiral, at this rate, we could break their entire formation within the next 10 minutes. Claire allowed herself a brief moment of quiet relief, though she kept her expression carefully composed for the sake of the crew around her. 10 minutes ago, she had committed 62 ships and thousands of lives to a gamble built on simulations and hope. Now, watching the battle unfold in real time, that gamble appeared to be paying off in ways even the most optimistic projections had not fully anticipated. But battles, she knew from long experience, rarely remain simple for long. "Admiral, I'm reading a massive power surge from the 5th capital ship," Grace said suddenly, her earlier relief replaced by sharp concern. "It's different from anything we've recorded. Weapon signature doesn't match any pattern in our database." Claire's attention snapped to the tactical display, where a previously quiet Vorlax vessel near the rear of the formation had begun glowing with an intense, pulsing light along its hull, distinct from the destruction unfolding around it. Whatever this ship had been doing during the opening moments of the battle, it had not been retreating or attempting to defend itself. It had been preparing. "Get me a full scan on that vessel immediately," Claire ordered. Daniel moved quickly to a secondary console, pulling up every available reading on the mysterious ship. "It's larger than the other capital ships," he reported, his brow furrowed in concentration. "And that power surge is still climbing. Whatever weapon they're charging, it's drawing far more energy than anything we've seen from their fleet so far." A tense silence settled over the bridge as everyone processed the implication of what Daniel had just described. The battle had turned overwhelmingly in the Terran fleet's favor within its opening minutes, but this new development threatened to upend everything they had gained. "Time until that weapon reaches full charge?" Claire asked. "Unknown," Daniel admitted. "We've never seen this signature before. I can't give you an accurate estimate." Claire's mind raced through the tactical possibilities, weighing the fleet's continued assault against the growing threat of an unknown weapon, capable of drawing that much power. Retreating the fleet now would mean abandoning the momentum they had built, potentially allowing the remaining Vorlax ships time to regroup. Ignoring the threat risked whatever devastating capability that mysterious vessel was preparing to unleash. "Redirect a portion of our fleet toward that vessel," she ordered. "I want its weapon disabled before it reaches full charge, but I don't want to pull our full force away from the rest of their formation. We press the advantage everywhere else, while dealing with this new threat directly." Across the battlefield, a squadron of Terran cruisers broke away from the main assault, angling toward the glowing capital ship at the rear of the Vorlax formation. Ethan and Charlotte's fighter squadron peeled off to escort them, weaving through the chaos of the ongoing battle, as debris and defensive fire from smaller Vorlax vessels filled the space between them and their target. "Admiral, the unknown vessel is powering up its defenses," Grace reported, watching as a new energy signature bloomed around the glowing capital ship, distinct from the shield technology used by the rest of the Vorlax fleet. "This isn't standard shielding, it's something else." Claire watched the tactical display with growing unease as the squadron of Terran cruisers closed the distance toward the mysterious vessel, only to find their weapons fire deflecting off a shimmering barrier unlike anything encountered from the Vorlax before. "Our attacks aren't penetrating," came the report from the lead cruiser's captain, frustration evident in his voice. "Whatever this shielding is, it's stronger than anything on their other capital ships." Daniel studied the readings pouring in from the engagement, his expression tightening with concentration. "Admiral, I think I understand what's happening. This ship appears to have been holding back, conserving power specifically for this defensive barrier, and the weapon it's charging. It's not part of their standard formation. This might be some kind of flagship or a specialized vessel meant to be deployed only when their fleet faced serious resistance." "A contingency plan," Claire murmured, watching the glowing vessel continue its slow, deliberate charge despite the chaos unfolding around it. "If that weapon reaches full power before we find a way through that shielding," Daniel said, "there's no telling what kind of damage it could do to our fleet. We need another approach." Claire's mind worked quickly, running through every option available to her. Direct assault had failed to penetrate the vessel's unusual defenses. A full fleet-wide bombardment risked drawing critical resources away from the ongoing engagement against the rest of the Vorlax formation, potentially allowing those ships time to recover and regroup. "Sophie," Claire said, opening a direct channel to the weapons control room, "I need you to look at the readings coming off that vessel's shielding. Is there any pattern to it? Any weakness we can exploit?" A brief pause followed, as Sophie and her team analyzed the data streaming in from the engagement. "Admiral, there's something unusual here," Sophie said finally. "The shielding isn't uniform. It's cycling through different frequency patterns, almost like it's still calibrating itself. If we can time our attacks to match a specific point in that cycle, we might be able to get a shot through before it fully stabilizes. How much time do you need to identify that timing? Claire asked. Given the complexity of the pattern, maybe 2 minutes, Sophie replied. But Admiral, based on the power readings, I don't think we have 2 minutes before that weapon reaches full charge. Claire looked out at the tactical display, watching the glowing capital ship continue its ominous charge, while Terran cruisers circled uselessly around its impenetrable shielding, and felt the weight of a decision closing in around her. Do it anyway, she said. Sophie, work as fast as you can. Daniel, get me every available reading on that weapon's charge rate. If we're going to find a way through that shielding, I want to know exactly how much time we truly have to work with. The bridge fell into focused, urgent motion once more, every officer aware that the outcome of the entire engagement now rested on finding a solution in the narrow window of time remaining before the mysterious Vorlax vessel unleashed whatever weapon it had been so carefully preparing. Sophie's hands moved faster than she had ever moved them before, her eyes flicking between 3 separate displays as she tried to map the shifting pattern of the alien shielding in real time. Beside her, Nathan called out readings as quickly as they came in, his earlier nervousness completely replaced by sharp, urgent focus. Patterns cycling every 4 seconds, Nathan said. There's a gap, right at the transition point, maybe half a second wide. That's not much of a window, Sophie muttered, adjusting her calculations, but it might be enough. On the bridge, Claire watched the seconds tick by on the tactical display, the glowing Vorlax vessel's power readings continuing their steady, ominous climb. Daniel stood beside her, relaying updates from across the fleet as the squadron of Terran cruisers held their position, waiting for a solution from the weapons control room. Admiral, that weapon's going to reach full charge in approximately 90 seconds, Daniel reported, his voice tense. Sophie, talk to me, Claire said into the comm. I've got it, Sophie replied, a note of cautious confidence entering her voice. There's a half-second gap in their shielding pattern every 4 seconds. If we can get our cruisers to fire in perfect synchronization, timed to that exact window, we might be able to punch through before the shield reforms. Half a second is an incredibly narrow margin, Daniel said. It's the only margin we have, Sophie replied. Claire made her decision instantly. Do it. Coordinate with the cruiser squadron directly. I want every ship firing in that exact window, no room for error. Sophie's team worked with practiced urgency, transmitting the precise timing sequence to the squadron of Terran cruisers, still circling the mysterious Vorlax vessel. Aboard the lead cruiser, the captain listened to the incoming instructions with a mixture of skepticism and grim determination. All weapons crews, he announced over the ship's internal comm. Prepare to fire on my mark, synchronized exactly with the timing sequence coming through from the Valor Dawn. This needs to be precise. We won't get a second chance. Across the squadron, weapons officers made final adjustments, watching their targeting systems count down toward the narrow window Sophie's team had identified. Ethan and Charlotte's fighter squadron pulled back slightly, giving the larger cruisers room to maneuver into optimal firing position. This is either going to work brilliantly, Charlotte said over the comm, or it's going to be a very short mission. Comforting thought, Ethan replied, watching the countdown on his own display. Back on the bridge of the Valor Dawn, Claire watched the timer count down, alongside the rest of her crew, every second stretching longer than it should have. The glowing Vorlax vessel continued its charge, now visibly pulsing with barely contained energy, its unusual weapon nearing completion. 3 seconds, Grace called out. 2. 1. Mark. Every weapon across the squadron of Terran cruisers fired in perfect unison, a coordinated barrage of energy striking the exact moment the alien shielding cycled through its brief, vulnerable gap. For a fraction of a second, nothing seemed to happen, the shimmering barrier still holding despite the precise timing. Then it collapsed entirely, and every weapon that had been aimed at the shield tore straight through into the hull of the vessel beneath it. Direct hit confirmed, came the report from the lead cruiser, disbelief evident even through the tension of the moment. We're seeing massive internal explosions across the target vessel. Their weapons' power readings are dropping rapidly. On the bridge, a wave of relief swept through the crew, though Claire kept her focus locked on the tactical display, watching to confirm the threat had truly been neutralized. The glowing capital ship, moments ago pulsing with an almost frightening intensity, now drifted lifelessly amid the wreckage of the battle, its engines dark, its mysterious weapon reduced to scattered debris. Weapon signature has gone completely silent, Admiral, Grace confirmed. The vessel is fully disabled. Claire allowed herself a long breath, the tension that had gripped the bridge for the past several minutes finally beginning to ease. Good work, all of you, she said, her voice carrying across the command deck. That was exceptionally close. Too close, Daniel murmured beside her, though a faint, relieved smile had returned to his face. With the threat of the unknown vessel eliminated, Claire turned her attention back to the wider battle still unfolding across the Halden expanse. The remaining Vorlax formation, already devastated by the opening minutes of the engagement and now further shaken by the loss of their specialized flagship, had begun to fracture entirely. Smaller vessels broke away from the main formation, some attempting disorganized counterattacks, others retreating toward the edges of the battlefield entirely. Admiral, we're seeing significant disarray across the remaining enemy ships, Grace reported. It looks like they've lost whatever central coordination was holding their formation together. Continue pressing the advantage, Claire ordered, but keep our formation tight. I don't want overconfidence leading to unnecessary losses this late in the engagement. Across the battlefield, Terran warships methodically worked through the remaining Vorlax vessels, their earlier momentum carrying them through an enemy force that had entered the battle expecting an easy victory, and instead found itself overwhelmed within minutes. Ethan guided his fighter through a tight formation alongside Charlotte and the rest of their squadron, providing cover for the larger cruisers as they systematically disabled one alien vessel after another. I count maybe 20 of their ships still holding any kind of formation, Charlotte reported, scanning the chaotic battlefield around them. The rest look like they're either disabled or trying to break off entirely. Let's make sure they don't get the chance to regroup, Ethan replied, banking his fighter toward a cluster of smaller Vorlax vessels, attempting to establish a defensive position near the edge of the battlefield. Within the weapons control room of the Valor Dawn, Sophie finally allowed herself a moment to lean back from her console, watching the battle's outcome become increasingly clear on the overhead display. Beside her, Nathan wiped his brow, the adrenaline of the past several minutes slowly beginning to fade. We actually did it, Nathan said, a note of disbelief still coloring his voice. We're not finished yet, Sophie replied, though a small, genuine smile had crept onto her face. But yeah, we did it. On the bridge, Claire watched the tactical display continue to update as the battle wound toward its conclusion, the once massive Vorlax formation reduced to a scattering of disabled or retreating vessels. What had begun as a desperate gamble against a fleet more than twice the size of Task Force Aurora had, against every reasonable expectation, turned into a decisive and overwhelming victory. Admiral, Grace said, remaining Vorlax vessels are breaking off entirely. It looks like they're retreating from the expanse. Claire studied the display for a long moment, watching the last scattered alien ships pull away from the battlefield, abandoning the wreckage of a fleet that had, just hours earlier, seemed poised to sweep unchallenged across the Federation border. Let them go, she said finally. We've accomplished what we came here to do. I don't want to risk further losses chasing down a broken retreat. The order rippled across the fleet, and gradually, the chaos of battle began to settle into the quieter, more sobering work that always followed a major engagement. Damage reports started flowing in from across Task Force Aurora, and Claire listened carefully to each one, bracing herself for the losses that even a decisive victory inevitably carried. Casualty reports are coming in now, Admiral, Daniel said quietly, reading from his datapad. We've confirmed the loss of 3 vessels, with moderate damage reported across several others. Full personnel losses are still being calculated, but early estimates suggest they'll be significantly lower than initial projections for an engagement of this scale. Claire absorbed the report with a mixture of relief and quiet grief. 3 ships lost, along with the crews who had served aboard them, was a genuine and painful cost, but measured against what could have happened, against a battle that had begun with Task Force Aurora facing a fleet more than double its size, the outcome represented something close to a miracle. Make sure every crew that requested support after this engagement gets it, Claire said. And I want a full report on those 3 ships. Every name, every service record. They deserve to be remembered properly. Understood, Admiral, Daniel replied. As the bridge crew began the meticulous work of compiling reports and coordinating recovery efforts across the battlefield, Claire allowed herself to walk toward the forward viewport, looking out over the drifting wreckage of the battle that had just concluded. The Halden Expanse, once a quiet, unremarkable stretch of space, now bore the scars of one of the most decisive engagements in Terran Federation history. She thought again of Outpost 7, of Ruth Ashford, of the silence that had fallen across the bridge when the distress signal cut off just days earlier. That silence had been the beginning of something the Federation had feared for months, a full offensive from an alien force capable of erasing an entire colony within seconds. Today, that offensive had been stopped, decisively and unmistakably, in the space of a single battle. But as Claire studied the wreckage scattered across the expanse, she could not shake a quiet, persistent unease. The Vorlax Collective had committed a massive fleet to this engagement, larger than anything Federation intelligence had anticipated, and had still been defeated far more thoroughly than either side had expected. Somewhere, she suspected, that failure would not go unanswered. "Admiral," Daniel said, stepping up beside her once more, "Fleet Command is requesting a full report on the engagement. They're already calling it one of the most significant victories in Federation history." Claire nodded slowly, her eyes still fixed on the drifting wreckage outside the viewport. "Send them everything," she said. "But Daniel, I want our intelligence teams looking closely at what we just faced. That flagship, the weapon it was preparing, I don't think that was a standard part of their fleet composition. I think it was something they kept in reserve, and I want to understand why, and what else they might be holding back." Daniel studied her expression for a moment, recognizing the familiar look of a commander already thinking several steps beyond the immediate victory in front of her. "You think this isn't over?" "I think," Claire said quietly, "that we just won a battle. I'm not yet convinced we've won the war." 3 days after the battle in the Halden Expanse, Claire stood in the recovery bay of the Valor Dawn, watching as the last of the salvage teams returned from the wreckage field, with reports on both Terran and Vorlax vessels. The Expanse had gone quiet in the aftermath of the engagement, but the work of understanding what had truly happened there was far from finished. Sophie approached her with a datapad in hand, her expression a careful mix of professional focus and lingering exhaustion. "Admiral, we've finished the preliminary analysis on the flagship vessel's weapon systems," she said. "You're going to want to see this." Claire took the datapad, scanning through the technical readouts with a growing sense of unease. "This is more advanced than anything we've seen from the Vorlax before." "Significantly more advanced," Sophie confirmed. "Based on the wreckage, that weapon was designed to punch through standard Federation shielding entirely, not just damage it. If it had reached full charge, our fleet would have faced something we genuinely weren't prepared to survive." Claire felt the weight of that assessment settle over her, a stark reminder of just how narrow the margin between victory and disaster had truly been. Any indication of how many more vessels like that one they might have? "Nothing conclusive yet," Sophie admitted, "but the fact that they had even one suggests this wasn't an isolated development. Whoever is directing the Vorlax fleet has been investing heavily in weapons technology that outpaces what we've encountered from them in the past." Claire handed the datapad back, her mind already turning toward the broader implications of what Sophie's team had uncovered. A single battle, however decisive, had not eliminated the underlying threat the Vorlax Collective represented. If anything, it had revealed just how much remained unknown about the true scope of their capabilities. Later that day, Claire gathered her senior officers in the same briefing room where she had first received orders to assemble Task Force Aurora. Daniel, Sophie, Grace, and several other key members of her command staff sat around the central table as she outlined the findings from the aftermath of the battle. "The engagement in the Halden Expanse was a genuine victory," Claire said, addressing the room. "We destroyed or disabled the vast majority of a fleet that outnumbered us more than 2 to 1, and we prevented what would likely have been a devastating strike against Federation colonies along the border. That achievement should not be diminished." She paused, letting the weight of the acknowledgement settle before continuing. "But what we uncovered in the wreckage of that flagship vessel tells us this fight is far from finished. The Vorlax Collective is developing weapons technology that exceeds anything we've previously encountered from them, and if that flagship was any indication, they were prepared to escalate this conflict well beyond what we initially anticipated." Daniel leaned forward, studying the data displayed on the table before them. "Do we have any indication of their next move?" "Not yet," Claire admitted. Fleet Command is treating this as a temporary reprieve rather than a resolution. Our victory likely set back their offensive plans significantly, but it would be a mistake to assume they won't regroup and attempt something similar again, likely with better preparation. Grace spoke up from her seat, her expression thoughtful. What does that mean for Task Force Aurora going forward? Claire considered the question carefully before answering. Fleet Command has authorized us to remain active as a standing defense force along the border, rather than returning to standard deployment rotations. Given what we now know about the technology the Vorlax are developing, I believe that's the right call. We need to stay ready. The briefing continued for another hour, covering logistics, repair schedules for the ships damaged during the engagement, and the ongoing analysis of the wreckage recovered from the battlefield. By the time it concluded, Claire felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling back over her shoulders, the brief relief of victory giving way once more to the steady demands of an ongoing conflict. That evening, Claire found herself back on the observation deck, looking out at the stars in the quiet solitude the space afforded her. Daniel joined her a short while later, 2 cups of coffee in hand, offering one to her without a word. "You've been quiet since the briefing," he observed, settling beside her at the viewport. "Just thinking," Claire replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "About the flagship?" "About all of it," she admitted. 3 days ago, we won what Fleet Command is already calling one of the most significant victories in Federation history. We should be celebrating that. Instead, I keep thinking about how close we came to losing everything to a single weapon we didn't even know existed, until it was nearly too late. Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully before responding. "I think that's exactly why we won, though," he said finally. "Because you didn't assume the fight was already decided, just because the early numbers favored us. You kept looking for the next threat, even in the middle of what looked like a clear victory. That's what let us find a solution before that weapon reached full charge." Claire allowed a small, tired smile at his words, recognizing the truth in them, even as the weight of the ongoing conflict remained heavy on her mind. "I suppose vigilance doesn't leave much room for celebration." "Maybe not," Daniel agreed. "But it does leave room for being ready, whatever comes next. And given what we accomplished out there, I'd say the Federation is in good hands." They stood together in comfortable silence for a while longer, watching the distant stars, each lost in their own thoughts about the battle behind them and the uncertain path that likely lay ahead. Claire thought of Ruth Ashford, of Outpost 7, of the 400 lives lost before Task Force Aurora had even been assembled. Their loss had set this entire chain of events into motion, and though the victory in the Halden Expanse could not undo that tragedy, it had at least ensured that other colonies along the border would not share the same fate, at least for now. In the weeks that followed, Task Force Aurora settled into its new role as a standing defense force along the Federation border, conducting regular patrols and continuing the detailed analysis of the technology recovered from the battle. Reports from Fleet Command indicated that Vorlax activity along the border had slowed significantly in the aftermath of their defeat, though intelligence officers remained cautious about interpreting the quiet as anything more than a temporary pause. Sophie's team continued their study of the captured weapon fragments, slowly piecing together a clearer picture of the technology the Vorlax had been developing. Their findings were shared with Federation shipyards and research facilities across the sector, informing a new generation of defensive upgrades, intended to ensure that no Terran fleet would again be caught unprepared by a weapon capable of bypassing standard shielding entirely. Ethan and Charlotte's fighter squadron, along with the rest of the pilots who had served during the battle, received commendations for their role in the engagement. Their coordinated defense of the cruiser squadron, credited with buying the crucial time needed to identify and exploit the weakness in the flagship's shielding pattern. Nathan, whose calm precision under pressure during the battle's most critical moments had not gone unnoticed, was offered a formal promotion within the weapons division, an opportunity he accepted with quiet pride, still somewhat amazed at how far he had come from the nervous technician who had questioned whether 98% charge would be enough. Claire, for her part, continued to lead Task Force Aurora with the same steady resolve that had carried her fleet through its first true test. She understood, perhaps more clearly than anyone else within the Federation, that the victory in the Halden Expanse represented not an ending, but a single chapter within a much longer and more uncertain conflict. The Vorlax Collective had revealed a willingness to develop and deploy weapons technology capable of threatening even the most advanced Federation defenses, and there was little reason to believe they would abandon that path simply because of a single, decisive defeat. Standing once more on the bridge of the Valor Dawn, watching her fleet conduct another routine patrol along the quiet stretch of border space that had so recently witnessed one of the largest battles in Federation history, Claire allowed herself a rare moment of quiet reflection. The stars outside the viewport looked much the same as they always had, distant and unchanging, indifferent to the conflicts unfolding within their light. But Claire knew better than to mistake that quiet for true peace. Somewhere beyond the border, the Vorlax Collective was almost certainly regrouping, studying the failures of their assault on the Halden Expanse, and preparing for whatever came next. Task Force Aurora had proven itself capable of meeting that challenge once, against overwhelming odds and an unexpected threat that had nearly turned the tide of battle in the enemy's favor. Whatever the Vorlax chose to attempt next, Claire intended to make certain her fleet would be ready to meet that challenge as well, not through overconfidence born from a single victory, but through the same careful vigilance that had carried Task Force Aurora through its greatest test so far. The war, she understood clearly now, was far from over. But for the first time since the silence had fallen over Outpost 7's distress signal, she felt a genuine, cautious confidence that the Terran Federation stood ready to face whatever came through the dark beyond the border, whenever it finally arrived.